Hello and welcome to this week's video. My name is Anuska Taylor. Thank you so much for joining me. It's always so great to see people supporting my channel. Please do keep subscribing if you haven't yet. And if you enjoy my videos, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, and do feel free to ask a question. Just a little caveat to that though, I can't answer specific questions about your voice without hearing and seeing you. So if you want personal support, please do look at one of the links below and book a session with me. But if you have a general question, I'm always very, very happy to answer general questions about the voice. There's just too many variables, otherwise I'm really taking a stab in the dark if I can't see and hear you. So let's get to it. And today I want to talk about people that speak English as a second language, which is probably a lot of you actually that watch my videos. Now, I just want to make a little point before I continue. This is for people that speak English as a second or even third language, where you feel quite fluent in the language. This isn't where you're learning the language and you're still having to think about what you're saying and vocabulary, but where you feel like you can interact quite freely in English. And I work with clients around the world. I've been doing this for nearly 15 years. I've worked with clients from Russia, from the United Arab Emirates, from the US, from Australia, from France, Germany, Italy, Cyprus, India, you name it. So pretty much every continent I have worked with clients. And I've come to see some patterns with what happens to the voice when they speak in English. So my first question to you before I get into this is, if English is a second language or third language for you, what happens to your voice when you speak English? Now, maybe you have never thought about this before, so I encourage you to record yourself speaking the same sentence in your native language and then in English, and just notice, try not to think too much about it, just do it very naturally, but just notice what happens to your voice. And that's all I'm going to say at the moment, but I just want you to sort of try this out and see what happens. So my work is very much about freeing us from the shackles of our vocal habits, which are very conditioned. It's what we've been taught is how we should speak, what we should sound like, what is and isn't acceptable. Most of the time, this is very unconscious because we learn to speak by mimicking, and we learn to speak, particularly our native language, from such a young age, we don't even remember the first words that we utter. And then if you are bilingual, perhaps you learned another language also very young, so you don't really remember the day you started learning English. Let's say you were brought up in, I'm making this up, Germany, but you were also learning English at the same time from a young age. So we learn to speak by mimicking, and that is what we are then, whether we're aware of this or not, absorbing all of the cultural conditioning around how we should speak that language. Now, when I say how we should speak that language, I want to make this really clear. I'm not talking about how we pronounce words, although that can be a part of it, but that's not really what I'm so interested in. It's more how free, how open, and how expressive we allow our voice to be. But you could say the same word, pronounce it in exactly the same way, but you could do it in a way where your voice is completely shut down and you're swallowing the sound and you're mumbling. Or you could do it in a way where your voice is really open and free and powerful. So I just want to make that really clear. I'm not telling you have to learn to pronounce words differently. This is not about pronunciation. This is about freedom, openness, expression, power, dynamics. So we have this voice persona, and we all do. I mean, I do too. There are personas around what it means to speak English. I mean, I find that quite funny actually, because anyone that spent any time in the UK, I mean, we all technically speak the same language, but my goodness, the difference in accents and dialects is vast, and you can literally tell where someone's from as soon as they open their mouth, or at least where they've spent a lot of their childhood, because the accents are so distinct. And that's one of the reasons I love living here. So I recognize there's going to be that also happening in other countries. You know, there's not just like one accent for the whole of Germany or one accent for the whole of Italy. You know, there are dialects, there are different accents within a country, but there are also cultural conditions around what it means to speak German, what it means to speak English, what it means to speak Italian or Portuguese, or fill in the blank. So that's what I'm talking about here. This is where it can really limit you if you're not conscious, because my job and my whole philosophy around my coaching is really reclaiming your true powerful voice, which is regardless of accent, regardless of what country you're from. It's really allowing whatever your accent, whatever your language, to really allow it to come out, to really allow yourself to be heard, to be seen, to have a really powerful, dynamic, expressive voice. So let's look at the voice persona, because I think from my experience, it shows up in normally the extremes. So we learn, as I say, unconsciously what is acceptable or not in terms of how we use our voice, how we speak. So let's use the example of German for a moment. I was working with a German couple at the weekend, and we talked about this because I always find it really fascinating. They're both fluent in English, but they're also fluent in German. They were brought up in Germany and they work over here. So what I see are usually two opposing paths that people go down. So the first one is they adopt whatever they have been taught unconsciously about how to use their voice in their native language into English. So if we're using sort of very formal German, that kind of high German as an example, the voice tone tends to be quite serious and a little bit harsh. It tends to be quite consonant heavy. There's not a lot of fluidity and melody and lightness and let's say friendliness in the tone. And so what happens is then that is translated into when they speak English. So that whole voice persona of everything they have been taught about how you speak when you speak German then goes into their voice when they speak English. So the other side of the coin then is, well, hold on a minute. Actually, I'm not speaking my native language anymore. I'm free to be who I want to be. And this isn't really my language. So there's almost this kind of imaginary barrier between me and my voice now. So now I'm allowing myself to be very expressive and very open and very free. But when I go back to speaking my native language, whoosh, the voice gets shut down again. So this is what I find really, really fascinating. So do you feel, which side of the spectrum do you feel you fall into? Do you tend to adopt the conditioning around your native language when you speak English? So whether that is mumbling, there are cultures in our world where it's not okay to really open your mouth and speak. So that then gets translated into how they speak English. Or it could be that you're very expressive. In Italian, it's very melodic, very open, very sort of free, and lots of gesturing. And then you take that into your English when you speak. So there's a lot of melody in the voice, a lot of expression in the voice. So which side of the spectrum are you on? Are you on the adopting or are you on the rejecting? And again, this is not to beat yourself up. This is an awareness exercise, because actually your true voice, and I say this all the time, is you're not bound by conditioning. You're not bound by, well, I have to do this, or actually rejecting that and doing the opposite. It's actually what is going to allow my voice the most freedom, the most expression, the most powerful communication that I can actually possibly deliver. And that's really where you want to go. But what we tend to do is it's very unconscious and we just absorb what we've been taught is possible. So I invite you, if you resonate with this, to actually speak a sentence in your native language and then speak exactly the same sentence in English and record yourself and notice if there's any differences between what happens to your pitch, to the melody, to the dynamics, to the intonation, to the expression in your voice. Does your voice change? And just start to notice, this is an awareness exercise, because your true freedom comes when you consciously choose how you use your voice versus you are feeling bound by the cultural kind of shackles of You shouldn't open your mouth. You shouldn't be too loud. You shouldn't be too expressive. You shouldn't sound too friendly. You know, you've got to sound like serious, or you've got to mumble, or you've got to pull your voice back, you know, so all of that. And just start to pay attention, because true freedom lies in you consciously making a choice. And you are going to want to use your voice differently in different circumstances. So if you're reading a bedtime story to your child, you're going to be using your voice differently than if you are in a business meeting. But are you adopting a persona to fit into that scenario based on the conditioning, what society has taught us, or is this your true voice coming through? And so, for example, in that example, you know, if you like to be expressive and you like to be open and free when you speak, can you bring that into the boardroom? Can you bring that into the meeting room? Or do you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm in this formal meeting, whoosh, I've got to pull my voice back. I've got to shut my voice down. So that's what this is really about. Can I consciously choose how I show up with my voice? Can I untangle myself from the cultural conditioning and the shackles of what I've been told implicitly or explicitly is how I should use my voice? So I hope this makes some sense. I hope this has been interesting for you. I'd love to know your comments. And I've got so many examples. I've just used German as an example today, but as I say, I've literally worked with people from all corners of the globe, and they tell me different things. You know, they'll say, well, in our culture, you know, no one speaks clearly, or everyone talks fast, or no one opens their mouth, or no one sounds friendly, you know, fill in the blank. But is that really then the true you speaking, or is that what you've been told is what you're meant to sound like? So that's the question. Can you bring more awareness and more consciousness to your voice and allow your true voice to come out while still pronouncing words the way you've been taught? It's not about changing the pronunciation. It's about allowing the voice out. And that is your true voice. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. Ask me any questions. Love to know your comments as well. But I will see you next week. Have a great week.